Hello, black people's whites of eyes. There is a nature show slash S where nature shows us also the rest of its complete identity. And it comes with its complete identity's, excuse me, relationship to all parts of itself, all quality aspects and nature of itself, nature slash S. Just like every self has a whole bunch of different parts of their body that have that are their identity, but it's a semi like the tip of your hair over your head. It's you, but it's a semi-nature relationship to your complete identity that does not fit in your hair, and that has a semi-nature relationship to nature's complete identity relationship to itself. But it is also through the species body of individual bodies. Nature's identity is generating group differences like two eyes, two sexes, two parts of time, distinct like for example, hyper invisible but still discernible is the past. To an extent, you know it was real always. To an extent, there too, you know that there was more past that you don't know about, but you know that it was. And there's the difference of that. There's a trinity inseparable from every individual detail, including the individual parts of a complete body. There's the body of the species body, individual species body, humanity of individual bodies. And again, all group differences generated by it or it shows us natural law is real. It shows us with negative value nature progression acts and natures that the suburbs from America to Russia to Ukraine, they look almost exactly the same. We must read each other's dreams, is what a Native American said somewhere on YouTube. I cannot find it. I have to look further, I guess. But that's like one of the, in other words, and what most important thing too, with that you can't leave that out of it because there are proofs that they were the unnamed founders. They were Native Americans. There were proofs that all the Native Americans, just like all the colonists, even the presidents, weren't in on the plan of James Madison and why they had to use it because there was already a remote possession of all formal voices for the science, the names of the people, the sciences, and everything in conjunction with that. Before America's founders were even born, there were only roles, even with slavery, only permitted northern colonies, southern colonies, more than 13. Only collusion slash us against all women. Against, and see, this had been because we were taking a breaching method, got names A through Z that could only operate the colonies, tribes, um, and now states. And as the only people, only locations, areas, and states anywhere the species body is could operate the names of countries. A breaching method knew that and realized it was going to get caught. And so it was people from different parts of the world that were collusions with each other, like a transnational crime group. And they figured out the only way they could get not caught was to become a hyper archetypal crime group by doing things to hurt people, sustain, make them respond wrongly, frame others for it too, and then have them respond properly for that, but wrongly missing its roles with it, while tactically degrading everyone's quality of fact-achieving nature, everyone's ability to appreciate how nature shows us, even when there was divergence, abridgments from its constitution. Nature shows us we could use it. We could all agree to be at the same time countries A through Z. But in all the locations, areas, and states, everyone at the same time could agree all of a sudden to be the same system and agree, and, and everyone's agreeing about the rules, and then everyone's can look for positive or negative from there together. We're still nature's going to demonstrate with negative value nature progressions, acts in nature, if we don't let it lead. It has a conjunction to our short words that we have been forbid to use and to communicate about with the hyper evidential, because the hyper evidential does not accord with where you guys have been taught to use research, data, and principles of reason. It has been abridged from what James Madison and the plural founders communicated. Pretend they knew that it showed the names of the people that abused them specifically to have them capable of discerning it. But we can discern it, but we have to understand what James Madison communicated. Why and how they had to have it declassified. Why and how his plan and the leverage of those unnamed founders caused the American Revolution. Even if it wasn't, even there wasn't, we don't know there was a Native American because we don't know their names. But that natural defense of Native American, first of all, president / chief, regardless of who said that or how that came to be, it's also ciphered to be deciphered. Because not only did our founders communicate, declassify about how and why nobody had free speech, and everyone had to pretend other to an extent / s, other ways they would have been incensed. But it wasn't just per the bodies involved, because everyone was tortured, extorted, fact-cheating nature, enslaved, therefore physically. Then they're going to speak about economics. We have to look at the law. We want like a parent would come home and say, "Holy God," but also discern like a virus. In other words, a non-human, hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, like a part of our body. In other words, the proverbial devil, the proverbial shaitan, is more probably having been, is about a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise that before modern religions were born, religious messages were born. They already took the names of the people, the scientists, from off the locations like the Campus Martius of the Republic for which we stand. This ancient republic stands abridged, its constitution and its ground. The suburbs were designed tactically to nature to cause negative value nature progressions, acts in natures. For that same method / s that did this perfected since before religious messengers were born. But they were born to where and how. There's a limit of what they could leave in the records that would not be corrupted. The truths that in their writing lose for lies. Sequence shifts self-value. The Old Testament and the Quran were written to catch, not to catch the guilty, but to show them used remotely. The people attacking the religions and the people defending them. Everyone, all natures of difference, collusion / s with the breaching methods use of the relativity of difference too, of relativity theory. Syntax. Oh, you don't know math. Math's supposed to be about measuring. There are proofs, nature showing us to put in words all the ways that we can discern the names of the people, the sciences, when they were little kids, the people of when they were just students, the people that were the names of the people, the scientists from off those campuses. made hyper additional, collusion slash S, forcing, tricking, hurting, and persuading other things, other slash S, or selves to be blamed for things that James Madison declassified for us to blame on the breaching method. But and not only did did the campuses fail them, it failed everyone, but from off the campuses. And we all discern this. And we discerned it when we were young. And that's part of the reason we know that we love our campuses and people anyway. We also know that people put fake ties, fake natures or ties to us and fake motivations for our campuses. And I recorded how this is affected, how this is manifest. I mean, it is recorded how this is manifest, but it is also recorded in a way with the hyper evidential where it's relative, where we could discern collusion slash S with the breaching method only known. That still is as collusion slash S. But thank God, for example, with the witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum in Old Wethersfield, Connecticut, where George Washington had to come right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War and to meet with the French general to stay at a place at Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. But there and places across the country, a certain type of victim slash hyper victim has been maintained as a victim predator slash hyper predator. And good people would change if they knew this. Excuse me, what James Madison communicated and about why. Not to entertain people pretending that it's debatable that James Madison's the only one of the plural founders that we know the name of. But we know that there were plural founders because they were strong enough to counter, extort, and force people to help at the same time with the Declaration of Independence, with the Constitutional Convention, and with that plan that eventually got off part of the torture, extortion, slavery method that was forced north and south. James Madison detailed about how why if anyone wanted to go against, to help women, to help Native, or to help stop slavery even, they were only allowed to do such through internationally monitored conversations. And where it could get around that anyway had all the sense and sensibilities of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, sick international companies, sick countries, all being and having been used remotely by a breaching method, not even realizing self-value. Right where no one's self-value is being and having been used remotely through United Systems, A through Z, tactical military, from natures in demonstration with distinctions A through Z, like human species body of individual bodies, our names relative to this system. A breaching method affected the operators of the names of the human species body of individual bodies, the countries. Nature showing that the country's names need to value it comes tied with where and how we need to value per nature, how it is generating demonstrations to us. The human species body that we cannot access the power slash might of but one way slash S, while simultaneously to correlate that means, to correlate slash hypercorrelate by that means. That's why we're simultaneously independent bodies. And no matter which one it is, well, like in other words, I'm just one person, but I caught I've recorded all the campuses A through Z, including the counters to it as collusion/S. It's positive/hyper positive because we could discern a breaching method also being and having been evolved. And people jumping into other people when they mention people's names. Like there's a Mendez officer at Wethersfield Police Department. I never had a word of conversation with him in my life. He faked other with the police report and forced Saudi collusions. But is also collusions various ways recorded with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and various natures of federal criminals, even if it was made up, involved with them like I never had a word of conversation with Dawn LaConch. She's one of the ones involved too, with people with the World Trade Center attack and all kinds of things at once, years apart. And then when brought up again too, intercities, all kinds of things, untimely deaths, years apart too, and body dumping spots and names next to them, and the killers, reported killers, and the prisons associated with them, and and all the people just forced others to use them remotely, including the Witness Protection Program. Many people tied to places and to a person named Robert Chevrolet involved too, with mayors from Wethersfield and a Casper family. I never had a class with Chuck Casper. Never saw him around campus. People pretend he's pretending other in databases. In other words, has some people brought him up too. The ones I can't get on paper. These are people that are changing, hiding, faking what actually was recorded digitally with the Facebook pages of the new networks. And the differences of the guilt where uses are also recorded of intelligence at the networks or next to them. Next to Fox Connecticut News are a bunch of people involved with the Facebook page of Judge Napolitano when he was with them. And when Tucker was with them, there are proofs that they might have fired them relative to this because they have other networks. The Channel 3 News attached me to fake conversations with them. And they have child abusers, leaders of kids, years apart, involved with a bunch of people next to Fox Connecticut News. And next to Channel 3 News through time, involved with victims advocates with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and child abusers, leaders of kids, first force, all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders, and motivation screening. They are used remotely as one of the things that are their motivations. We have to go to in other words, a DeMoro family. I don't think he went to my grammar school. I mean, it was on his street. I don't know if he went there. I never saw him on that campus. Joe DeMoro has a Ray Reynolds, who I never saw on any campus except for that 1 year. On a campus I went and they closed that school. Fuller School. And there's a Joe DeMoro, a John DeMoro, and a Paul DeMoro involved with the DeMoro's Market where it was then and now, involved with intelligence agencies, and former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, with his co-defendants in a 2006 district court case. Right before that, too, a long term before it, they were involved with people next to Fox Connecticut News, too, and next to Channel 3 News. And with the sources of WTNH next to crime scenes, not the crime scenes, and along Route 175 with a whole bunch of people. Then and now, further involved with elderly homes, elderly programs, the kids, campuses, medical and fire campuses at the same time, collusion/S with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists. All this is recorded. And there's a Phil Collo further with the Whiting Forensics with the Wethersfield Police named Mendez involved with this. and this police department with one's named Dylan. A whole bunch of names that they brought. That I never had a verbal conversation with Dylan in my life or any other Dylan in his family. They have a whole bunch of people that have been planting evidence on all sides of my house, also with an Inspector Mike, and with people forging and switching names. There are a bunch of people with the New Britain Superior Court's Facebook page involved with former director of the FBI with digital crimes, with whiting forensics, and with sexual and medical offenders of kids, with women judges' roles. For how what is recorded hyper-evidentially is how the locations /S are used remotely, criminally foreign influence relative to names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, their lawyers, the sources, the family members, the neighbors, the news at the same time, and the interbranch and intelligence, foreign and domestic, as they are actually shared. They have all the countries that were involved with the World Trade Center attack. It came through their use of campuses and their use of difference. This breaching method showed the only three branches of government. It showed them our countries A through Z. Nature's demonstrations of their collusions with itself. Everyone's collusions with itself. Self-value. Having been blamed on other things other than ourselves, so they could do that the way it shows them. This is about a predicate acts with facts method /S. I am not a lawyer. Vaccines, the science of sharing identity. And one of the things that vaccines is that the names of the people, the sciences, are offensively making confessions, not just to a hyper-foreign breaching method that needs things like criminal foreign influences blamed wrongly too, more and more, until it's correct more and more, while wrongly exactly the way it needs, as collusion /S, to hide collusion /S with this predicate acts with facts method /S roles. Because it knew nature would demonstrate to humanity that a breaching method is one of the things all those multi-front civil rights impositions were about at the same time. That's why they won't get on paper into branch, because they already had collusions with making even when they have the right outcome in cases. They can't, they already had collusion /S with all natures of crime scenes and needs to hide. We have to show how everyone was guilty at the same time. And use /S of it recorded, including with the court, a sequence shift from inside the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center that morning of the attack was shown to the court. Names on both sides of that case and their sources, and the news at the same time had have /S collusions and roles with confessions before and after the World Trade Center attack. Also, by people involved with other natures of organized crimes and criminally foreign influence /hyper-criminally foreign influence uses of the World Trade Center and of Washington, D.C. It's many people tied to two speech class teachers I have roles with the World Trade Center, with interstates, with Washington, D.C. And all along Route 175 is one of the things they're confessing, demonstrating, recording, tied to a whole bunch of people involved with mayors, involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, all these different countries in the news. All kinds of fake things in databases. They can't afford to get on pay. There's a quality of fact cheaping nature. This is why they can't afford to have discerned why and how. There's a witch trials place next to Webb House, where George Washington had to come to meet to counter-extort too. He had to leave slavery entrenched, however, even. He had to leave, no one allowed to speak what James Madison declassified the unnamed founders and him about. And they were using his plan and that leverage of those unnamed founders. We're supposed to not have them replaced and pretended science, everyone using the words that we knew were forced by the breaching method and by the unknown founders. to have it happen at the same time, where it was against the law, against everyone, on the books and off the books, layers of things. Black things, there were, collusion / S. No one could discern the hyper collusion there. But we have black people's rights of eyes as means to. We have how this is about relativity / hyper relativity as means to, as nature shows. Do not propose vaccine. Keep value here. Not as life or death, but as what's further positive. To and as what is the value of to them simultaneously. Because nature's complete identity loves the simultaneous. Because it is the hyper simultaneous. Distinctly from how a portion of itself is the simultaneous. And a portion of that self that is simultaneous can't help but have a portion of itself be hyper simultaneous too. And there are, in other words, 3 mixtures of itself. 3 parts of time, for example, are bound. We are shown by nature's identity, showing us the value. It is the value of seasons that are not even here yet. Even if they never get here again, even if this season doesn't get here, doesn't finish. They're only increasingly valued. Because then value is here or it is forced from here. If more and more while we stay abridged, even if we all agree to stay abridged, and like with the suburbs, this is worse than bottom. How could you say that? Look at the cities. People jump in with passions, emotions dishonestly, because this conversation of logic, this preaching method read with James Madison and the plural founders communicated. They wanted nothing to do with slavery. But people say, oh, America's founders had slaves. Our founders declassified first of all, the databases were all criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw. And everyone had to hide their actual roles with James Madison's plan. Even once they were known. And the plural founders, that leverage for it. To force ourselves to get the Constitution on a bridge. That which is hyper native pure. Nature itself shows us. Multi-front, the difference between the colonists and the Native Americans. It needs that used. The hyper foreign, that which is we could name a hyper archetypal criminal enterprise. I'm not a lawyer. We could use, for example, how nature shows. The predicate is valued to English, while the predicate act is valued to law. About nature being invisible but still discernible, for example, as the parts of speech of English grammar, distinctly from how it is hyper invisible but still discernible. For example, as the body of what and why and how we are needing to appreciate more than one verb, more than one name for a verb, rather. And for example, why 2 of those are named participles, and they're about only 2 parts of time. The present participle and the past participle. See, these 3 parts of time are parts of the body of the forever nature. That nature's nature is. That nature is. That nature's nature, its body is discernible. And this is a science that we should have it organized, and we need to make, like, for example, we have to name that scientific value. We don't have to pretend it's a god or believe it's a god or whatever, or agree about the name of it, but we have to have a name for it, for a scientific value of for example, how it is not our species body, and nor is it the other species bodies that generated and generates things across species bodies that show us to an extent the body of the invisible but still discernible / hyper invisible but still discernible. It shows us we are distinct from the other species bodies, but non-distinct from them and simultaneous with them, but also per this further distinct identity of distinct identity of simultaneous nature. We don't have to call it the hyper simultaneous. I'm just saying I think we should call it the hyper simultaneous nature. The hyper invisible too. Vaccines. Thank you.